This? What is this? Well, I could tell you what it isn't. This is not a Ferrari, nor is it a Porsche, or even a Toyota. It isn't even a car. This right here is an Italian fighter jet, and throughout the course of this video, I'm going to show you exactly why that is. Let's talk brief history of the Huayra. The mere thought of this vehicle was introduced in 2003 with the release of the Zonda S Roadster. The Huayra is made to compete with vehicles such as the Porsche Carrera GT, the Ferrari Enzo, and the McLaren SLR. The styling of the Huayra took 5 years, with 8 scale models, 2 full-scale models, and hundreds of drawings. According to Horacio Pagani himself, in defining the size of the Huayra, I immediately thought of a car that would be longer than the Zonda, a track increased by 70 millimeters, a cabin position shifted 40 millimeters to the back, and even more spacious. The silhouette should be soft, easy to read, and forms itself from the lean and sleek lines that have a clear beginning and an end. Man, I wish I could go back to designing vehicles. Anyways, elliptical shapes are a common trend around this vehicle, on both the interior and the exterior. This is always to remind the driver and those passing by of the Pagani brand. Let's talk specifications. The behemoth behind the driver in the Pagani Huayra is a 6-liter M58 twin-charge V12 from Mercedes-AMG. It creates 730 horsepower at 5,800 RPM and 738 pound-feet of torque at 6,500 RPM. These numbers might not seem like a lot in the land of factory-built drag cars that make 1,000 horsepower, but in this vehicle you feel every little bit of that 730 horsepower. The engine is paired to a 7-speed sequential transmission, rocking you from 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds with a top speed of 230 miles an hour. And now onto the chassis. The chassis is a carbon fiber titanium monocoque chassis with front and rear tubular subframes in crimple alloy steel. It has a wheelbase of 110 inches, and the vehicle in its entirety weighs about 2,975 pounds. That might seem like a lot, but to put that into perspective, the 5th gen Chevrolet Malibu weighs in at 3,415 pounds. 40% of the weight is at the front, and 56% of the weight is at the back, so it's not a 50-50 split, but it's close. And this vehicle is not cheap. The starting price for a Pagani Huayra is $3,600,000. Plus, there's about $400,000 worth of options, so you can opt this out to be a $4 million car, which is one hell of a tax write-off. Think like a business expense too. Firstly, when we talk about the exterior, we must talk about the back-end design. I promise this is important. Hear me out for this. First of all, take a look at the big oval that contains the grille and the quad exhaust. But that's not all. I want you to take a look at the quad exhaust closely. Yeah, it's a squircle, but the design is mimicked all over the vehicle. Take a look at the taillights as an example. They are in the same formation as the exhaust, -1. Keep this in mind when we move on to the front end. Other interesting features of the back end include the big carbon fiber diffuser, along with a rain light when thundering around the Nürburgring. And the Huayra badge is in the style of a signature, which I absolutely dig. Nextly, I'd like to talk about the front end of the Pagani Huayra. It has big suck, despite being a mid-engine car, but there's a reason for that. See these flaps on the front? Oh yeah, this is where the Italian fighter jet part comes in. They work to optimize airflow, but they also work as an air brake. There are 2 at the front, and there are 2 at the back. Now let's take a look at the headlights. These also have the same pattern as the exhaust, but if you look carefully, there's actually a hidden oval in the assembly, which I think is a pretty cool detail. Nextly, I'd like to talk about the side profiles. Profiles, plural. We're talking about both sides. Other than this huge piece of carbon fiber that pulls itself up from the other side of the vehicle and wraps around the rear bumper, there is Horacio Pagani's name. He signed it on the side as an emblem. There's also the side marker light that incorporates the Pagani logo in itself. It's an oval. And also there is a Pagani emblem on the fuel filler cap. Nextly, I'd like to talk about the flaring mirrors. I was in a Discord call with my friends, and I was asking them, what do these mirrors look like? The best conclusion that we can come up with is that they kind of look like a falling leaf or like a flower bud. Also on the side of the mirrors is a small strip of the Italian flag, because as we all know, this is an Italian fighter jet. And finally, I'd like to talk about the doors. This vehicle has gull-wing doors, and they open up like this. And now we can move on to the interior of the Pagani Huayra. There are a lot of ovals in here. I'm going to quickly speed run through all of them, because if we go through each one. We're going to be here all day. So there are ovals on the wheel, the dashboard, the paddle shifters, the center console, the dials and switches, the indent of the shifter and the handbrake, the rear view mirror, the seats, the gas pedal, and other places that people in the comments will tell me I missed. You know who you are. Anyways, let's talk about the steering wheel. Unlike the 570S that I previously reviewed, there are buttons on the steering wheel. They control the essentials such as the turn signals, the lights, the windshield wiper setting, the brights, the cycles information, the ESC, and not the horn. The horn's not in the center. You actually have to move upwards. Put your thumb on the two buttons on the top of the steering wheel. Before we move past the steering wheel, let's talk about the shifting. This thing has a 7-speed sequential transmission, which you can shift via the paddles or the lever in the center. Also in the center, there is a handbrake, which I find pretty neat for a $4 million supercar. It is cool that Pagani is giving you the option between the paddle shifting and the clicky click, but I guess that's what you get when you pay some pretty big bucks. Now let's talk about the dashboard. You got pretty fancy gauges for a pretty fancy car. You have a singular screen in the center and an analog odometer. And now we can talk about the windows of this vehicle. Not the operating system, like specifically the windows. It is pretty spacey in here, but one thing I do have to note is that if you look up, you don't get a whole lot of shielding from the sun. I mean, you got those little like black imprint things that kind of help keep out the sun a little bit, but not really. It's kind of weird to get sunburn from a $4 million car, but it is what it is. And so that concludes the tour of the Pagani Huayra. So now we can take it for a drive. Alrighty, driving the Pagani Huayra. And I gotta say, it's fast. I really wish the sun wasn't on the gauge cluster. Oh geez, we're going really fast. Also sounds really nice too. Just listen to, like, when we let off the gas, it just whines. Yep, we're just at track day and we're just gonna be passing people in the Pagani Huayra. Okay, I know throughout the video I call it the Huayra, but that's because it's an H and it's messed me up. I'm American. I'm allowed to botch sayings. Woo! Got some airtime there. Got the Audi R8 in front of us. It's passing as well. Really good brakes, but also it's the aerodynamics too. So I know when I was in my video, I was talking about the how the sunroof kind of doesn't really block out the sun, but in all honesty, you don't really notice that when you're driving. You don't really notice the sun peering through. And this vehicle just goes and goes and goes. We're at 250 kilometers an hour. 270. Ooh. Hitting traffic. In the last video, in the last automotive review I made, I was talking about the fact that the 570S would be the vehicle I'd buy. All of you were telling me that that vehicle would be unreliable, and you're probably right. So I think this vehicle will be the better vehicle to have. The engine is made by Mercedes, so it should last at least a little bit longer. I would not, if I were to buy a vehicle like this, God forbid the day, I'd never be able to afford this or the insurance, but I would want to drive a vehicle like this because it's fun, not as like a social status like so many people do. I just want to have a vehicle that's fun to me, and this vehicle is so much fun to me. It just sounds good, it feels good. It's just a vehicle to have fun in, just for the fun of it. Because if a vehicle's not fun, what's the point? I don't remember which YouTube channel it was, but I was watching a video of someone just driving like a Pagani like this, just through town, just having a blast with it. They weren't like doing like any, like they weren't doing any illegal speeds. They were just bringing up like 4,000 and shifting. But it still sounds so good. All right, let's pull in before we run out of gas. Alrighty, we're basically out of gas, so that's all the racing I could do. But this vehicle feels very, very nice. It's very grippy. It keeps you on the ground. And it's also a nice interior too. Like, even though like my head is basically almost up against the top window, I still feel very planted in this vehicle. I mean, you got all like the toggle switches. This feels like you're in a plane. You got all the switches, the dials, everything feels very physical instead of like being like a touchscreen. I mean, there's even a lever on the door that if this feels like a plane. This is 100% a plane. It's a fighter jet. In conclusion, this vehicle is brilliant. This is the closest thing you could get to having a fighter jet other than to just straight buying a fighter jet. But I suppose if you have $4 million to spend, I suppose a fighter jet wouldn't really be out of the question, would it? That is it for this video. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, subscribe, share if you so please. And because it is proper academic etiquette, all the sources I used are linked in the description. Feel free to check them out, especially Pagani's website. Pagani has a pretty interesting website. I wouldn't rate it as like high as McLaren, but still a pretty neat website. Though this video took me a little bit to make, it's always a blast doing all the research and even recording this. So if you'd like to see me review a vehicle of your choice, feel free to comment what kind of vehicle you'd like to see me review, and I'll see what I can do. But until then, my name is Future, and I'll see you in the distant travels. Bye-bye.